The 46th Psalm is one of the great psalms in the entire collection of the 150 psalms in the Bible. In my own opinion, it rivals the 23rd Psalm for the depth of ideas that it has about who God is and the strength that God imparts and the protection that He gives to all of us. The word refuge is not an unfamiliar word to us, especially right now in the global radical Islamic ISIS that's going on around us, and all of these things that threaten our world. And people are looking for refuge. And we have so many, refugees. People who have tried to escape and have escaped into other places where they felt that it would be more safe. The psalmist is not talking about the cessation of war. Instead, he's talking about how God gives us strength and refuge to overcome the perils of life. But he doesn't say he will take away from us the perils of life. And so sometimes we simply have to live through these things. Now, that's not something that we would like to hear. We would like to hear that God will protect us in a way that means that we would not have these perils. But that isn't the idea of this text. The psalmist begins by saying, God is our refuge and strength. Well, that's difficult. It sounds so wonderful, it sounds so beautiful, and yet it's really hard to believe. It's hard to trust in this idea because we see so much tragedy around us, and we see so much sorrow, and we see so much heartache, and we wonder sometimes, God, why are you allowing all of this? And so he describes the turmoil of life in the early part of this psalm. He introduces it by saying, here's the major premise. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. Therefore, I won't fear, he says, even though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the sea. Well, it's a highly symbolic idea, of course. And yet, it says to us, don't fear life. Live life. Appreciate God. Be thankful and grateful to God for what God does and who God is and how He is always with us. Do you remember the last words that we have of Christ before His ascension? There were words about this. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. Again, I say, that really is hard. It's hard to believe because we find, in so many cases, we find the idea that this is so impractical, that this is just such a, it's a thing that it sounds good, but you really can't practice it. It doesn't really work. It's sort of like Paul's statement in 1 Corinthians 13 where he says, love never fails. And we have a little caveat that we put there. Love never fails most of the time. Love never fails part of the time. Love never fails. However, we have those things. And that's the reason that I say this is hard to accept. It's very demanding. I'm going to mention this a couple of times in the lesson this morning. The word faith does not appear in this psalm, but the idea of faith is proclaimed probably stronger in this psalm than you'll find anywhere else in the entire book of Psalms. It's a proclamation not of just faith as trust. It's a proclamation in reference to God and His imparting to us the strength that we need to overcome. You know this fellow named Martin Luther? You remember him? I want to say just a couple of things about Martin Luther because it's something that fits very, very well into this. Martin Luther was a great reformer of 1517. He was an Augustinian monk, and he came to the realization that the idea of trusting in God, trusting in the atonement of Christ, was more important than the idea that my good works are what saved me. And so he began making these proclamations. Well, for a while, people didn't pay a great deal of attention to it. And then the first thing you know, there came to be a following of people who understood what Martin Luther was talking about. He was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Plots were laid to kill him. He had to go and hide in a tower for a long time. And yet he never lost the idea that God is working in our behalf. And he sat down and wrote a beautiful poem, and then he put it to music. You know what that poem is. It's very hard to sing, by the way. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper he, amid the floods of mortal ills prevailing. But still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and powers are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. Were not the right one on our side, the man of God's own choosing, doth ask who this may be? Christ Jesus, it is he. Lord Sabaoth is his name, from age to age the same. And he must win the battle. Those are beautiful, wonderful words. And they come directly from this Psalm 46 that was just read for us. I've wondered many times, what does the word Sabaoth mean? Because in that song, the word occurs. And the word also is used by James. It means the Lord with the army. It means the Lord of hosts, as it is translated in many other versions. And the whole idea is that God is armed. And God fights in our behalf. And it's his power that is the only power in heaven or earth that can combat the evil one. And so this whole idea is that there is a spiritual strength that is so much stronger than military powers, than the powers of ISIS, than the powers of the terrible things and terrible people that would attack us. The world is in chaos in so many ways, especially since the things happened in France not long ago. And yet, for Christian people, there needs to be the realization that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore I will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though the waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surge. In the text here, over on the side, there's the little word Selah. It's not really a part of the biblical text, but it is a musical notation that means pause. And so the idea seems to be here that as the psalmist wrote this, that people came around and said, we need to stop and think about this one, don't we? Pause here. And after he says this, after he describes the turmoil of life, or maybe the turmoil of his nation, after he described that as the mountains falling into the sea, and the surge of the wind of the ocean, and the wind that is blowing, and all of these things are closing in on us. And yet, he says in the very next verse, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. You know, I love water, and I love to hear the water as it rolls down the mountain, as the stream passes by, to see its beauty and all. We lived in New Orleans for a number of years, and I remember the mighty Mississippi. It was not very pretty because it was muddy by the time it gets down there. And if you're flying over it and you see where it empties into the ocean, into the Gulf of Mexico, it's very muddy. But there was something tranquil about that. There was something lovely about that. And so the psalmist is in the business of contrasting right here. And he says there's a stream, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. We're living at a time, folks, when people are disturbed within and without. People's lives are on edge because of fear. All over the world today, people are living in fear. And the psalmist says, I recognize that. I recognize that. But God is our refuge and our strength. And then after he describes it, he says, there's that tranquil sea, that tranquil stream, that tranquil river that flows into the city of God. It just brings tranquility. It brings peace. It brings the idea that God is really sovereign and God is in charge. Oh, sometimes people say, when things are going well, you know, where are you, God? No, I don't think this psalmist would have said that. Instead, this psalmist would have said, I know you're with me, Lord. Now, that's what's hard to understand. Things are falling all to pieces, you say. Things are crumbling in my own life. God, where are you? Is the natural outburst of these conditions. But the psalmist says, hey, listen, God is our refuge and our strength. Perhaps we've lost some of the feeling and the thought of this great and wonderful psalm. The founder of the Methodist Church, John Wesley, he used part of this psalm as a part of his life. It is said that some of the dying statements that John Wesley made, literally just before he died, he quoted a portion of this psalm. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Do I say that? Do I feel that? Do I believe that? In the times of my own personal peril, my own personal upset, my own personal disappointment, my own personal sorrow, my own personal failure, is that what I say? Or do I say, God, where are you? And then he comes on down and he says, he makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. And then a statement that I love. I want you to open your songbooks for a minute. The number one, 844. 844. Because it's just a statement that's taken directly from this. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. That's a little short song. Let's sing it together. It's such a beautiful little song. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Folks, that's what we need. We need simply to be still and know that He is God. We need to get rid of the turmoil in our lives, not by reacting to turmoil, but by responding to God. We need to learn to be still and know that the sovereign of the universe has promised us that He will be with us always, even until the end of the world. Agitation has been, for centuries, one of the plagues of mankind. While I was preparing this lesson, by the way, I was thinking about this just the other day. I mentioned my preparation a whole lot as I preach. I want to share that with you. That's the reason for it. But while I was preparing this lesson, I stopped and thought, a number of times this expression occurs. Not a whole lot, but a number of times it occurs at crucial moments in the history of Israel. And so I took a concordance and I just went back and looked up the idea of be still. And here's some of the passages that came to mind. Exodus chapter 14. Let's go back and look at that for a moment. The Israelites had been delivered out of Egypt. You know, the death of the firstborn, the Passover and the Passover lamb and all of those things. The crossing of the Red Sea was about to take place, but the people saw something that was, it was tragic. There they were up against the Red Sea, and there was the army of Pharaoh. They couldn't turn to either side. They couldn't cross the sea. And Pharaoh was going to capture them. And so Moses said, the Lord will fight for you. You need only what? To be still. Oh, we get so fretful. God works better with a tranquil heart than He does with a fretful heart. And He can come into our hearts and make us something that we never dreamed that we could be. Psalms 37 and verse 7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. You see, God works better in our lives when we're still and tranquil, because then we're receptive. But when we're fretful and agitated, it's very difficult for us to see the beauty and the wonder of the statement that God is our refuge and our strength. I guess this one is known to all of us. Mark chapter 4, verse 39. Jesus and the apostles are in a little boat, and they're out on the Sea of Galilee. And you see, the Sea of Galilee was situated in such a way that the winds of the coming off of the Mediterranean, would come through the passes and cause a whirl, and a storm could arise very simply, very easily. And so they were in this little boat, And the storm was terrible. And the apostles, one of them said, Lord, do you not care if we perish? And Jesus stood up and he rebuked the wind. And what did he say? Peace, be still. And when he said that, the wind died down and there was a great calm. I realized that Jesus was not talking about our own lives when he said that, but the idea is so prevalent in Scripture. When there are storms in our lives, when there's disappointment in our lives, when there's times when we fail, when there's times when we wish we hadn't done something, times we wish we had done something, and we're so fretful, we need to stop and see the words of Christ. Peace, be still. Be still and know that I'm God. The whole idea is that God works in our lives in a wonderful, wonderful way when we're still. In a wonderful way when we put away the fretting and we turn and depend on him. And as I said earlier, the word faith, the word trust doesn't appear in this psalm. But it is a strong affirmation of the great and wonderful harvest that comes to us if we just learn to trust him, if we just learn faith and its meaning. And then when the mountains fall into the sea, symbolically, when there's the surge of the wind, symbolically, when there are all kinds of troubles in life, be still and know that I'm God. We're living through many threats. We're living through turmoil. And the world globally is certainly amid threats. This is the time, not for political reasons, not for military reasons or military might, but this is a time when you and I need to learn that God is our refuge and our strength, that God is a very present help in time of trouble. If you're not a Christian today, we're going to sing an invitation song that invites you to come and become the child of God and see how the growth of your spirit can produce something in your life that you never thought possible. We invite you to come. Let's stand together.